something that needs a little fixing on Farpoint Farms.
Hey guys, it's Eric here at Farpoint Restorations. Today we'll be replacing spark plugs in a Volvo 5-cylinder engine, but this job is the same for the 4s, the 5s, and the 6s, turbo and non-turbo. Non-turbo is being a little easier to do, but not a whole lot, to be honest with you. And it's not a hard job. I'm going to get the camera over here. We only need a few tools: Torx T27, Torx T25, and of course an extension, a spark plug socket, and maybe a magnet to make things a little easier. Let's do it. All right, well, the spark plugs live under here. And this cover, if it's a non-turbo, is simple. You got T27s, 8 of them all together. You pull those out and that'll undo this cover here. But on a turbo model, we have to not remove this pipe, but we have to get it out of the way. And we're going to do that by removing these 2 screws here. Looks like this one's been replaced with a flat blade. That one is still an original T25. So let's go ahead and pull those off right now. And we're going to be able to shift this far enough to the left and right to do the rest of this job. Now, one thing I'll say about doing a job like this is that the spark plugs that you use should be genuine Volvo parts, or at least try to get the genuine part equivalent. If you just go ahead and pick up auto lights or something like that, you're going to end up causing a lot of issues with your car down the road. They just don't do well. They just don't do well with aftermarket plugs, and I'm not sure why that is. But okay, once you have removed both those, you can see now I can move everything over enough to get to my other bolts. These here are T27s, and I'll go ahead and remove those. I always like to think that Volvo was kind enough to leave us with a nice shelf to put all our screws here by just leaving them up there. So I'll go ahead and remove all these. All right, once those are off, there's 2 clips here and here. Pull that up. Now's a good time to inspect your timing belt to see if there's any issues. And then we can slide the other piece out, and we have exposed our coils. Now, you might see a little bit of oil here, and I do. Usually, when you have oil that gets in there, what you're looking at is that gasket right there has gotten stiff, and I can feel it. This should be extremely flexible. It's not too bad, but maybe we'll turn it around and reuse it. This car has some corrosion built up inside of it, some gunk and such. All right, the other thing I would recommend doing is marking your cylinders, which it looks like the previous mechanic did, right? Coil 1, coil 2, coil 3, coil 4, and coil 5 are all marked nicely. I appreciate that because we're not actually going to unhook the wiring to these. We're just going to flip this up and lay it over, and that's going to give us access to what we need to do next. We have to remove 5 little 10 millimeters. So I'll go ahead and switch my socket over and we will do that. All right, we're going to pull these out. When I pull these out, what we are looking for here is oil or condensation. This one has oil in it, but it's coming down through that cap. Now that long term, if it were to fill the cylinder, could be quite bad for the car. It actually has some wiring issues there. That's not good. I'll get that one aside. I'll probably tape that up before I put it back in. That's kind of bad news. And that one there, you just kind of slide out. Okay, once they're all loose like so, now we've exposed our cylinders. I'm going to take off the 10, put a spark plug socket on, and we'll proceed with taking off our spark plugs. I'm just going to pull them one at a time, because basically once you've removed the spark plug, you've introduced a wide open hole down into the base of the engine, and a lot of bad things can happen if anything gets down inside of there. Now, I don't have rubber inserts. I don't particularly care for those. So when I take my spark plugs out, I just top in like that and pull it out. And these are actually really good plugs. They're Denso Iridiums, PK20R, PR11s, and they don't look all that bad. This cylinder here, I couldn't remember the last time I did it, but this cylinder here, we have a little bit of white up on top. That's a little bit of oil burning on that cylinder, but nothing too bad for, the era and age of this car. Cool, well, let me go ahead and swap that one out. Moving on to the next one. This job is like on a scale of 1 to 10. If you have the Torx bits and a regular metric socket set, wow, this is a 1 out of 10. Take your time and be careful, and you won't have any problems. All right, there's number 2. Number 2 looks better. Number 2 doesn't have a white buildup, it's just a light brown. That's pretty much what we're looking for. That's what we want to see on a spark plug. These plugs seemed a little bit loose, but there, I mean, there's no leak. That, you can look down the cylinders into the spark plug tubes and see if there's any kind of evidence of damage. Okay, see how that one has oil? Oil is leaking from this seal down into that cylinder. If it got too bad, you could actually damage the coil. On top, it's a little white, but there's no real buildup. I'm still saying that plug is fairly normal. I'm taking out this one, number 4. Just want to kind of pull that hose to the side. I see a lot of people remove this whole hose, and while it doesn't add a ton of work, it adds work. If you're doing this for a living, time is money, so why waste the money? All right, there's number 4. A little bit of oil down in there. Now what you don't want to do is spray carb cleaner or anything down into these cylinder holes with or without a spark plug in it. You're just going to make the situation worse. Just leave it be. If there's oil in that cylinder or spark plug tube, it will drain down into the cylinder and it'll burn. But if we push our luck with it and pour stuff down in there, you could create what's called hydro locking, and that would actually damage the engine, so we don't want to do that. There's number 5. Number 5, look at that, a little bit oily on there on the surround, but overall not a bad burn. That indicates that even though this engine has got a lot of miles on it, it's not in that bad a shape. That's it, my friends. We're already back onto the putting it back together. So look at your spark plug coils and make sure that you're putting them in the right places. And I've got one that needs a little bit of work. This one here has some wiring issues. See it right there? That could be a big problem going forward, so I'm going to try to clean that up. I don't know how that would have happened. In fact, I don't know that I've seen that very often in life, but stuff happens. If those two short to each other, then we got a problem. So I'm going to spray a little bit of brake cleaner on that. I'm going to tape that up just to make sure that we don't have an issue, and then we'll continue. Early Volvos, like the early 80s, especially the 240s, they had terrible harnesses. After about 10 years, they would just flake off. It was, in some ways it was comical, but in other ways it was absolutely tragic how poorly they were designed. And we would put harnesses on those cars, but of course those harnesses were probably, maybe 40 wires in the engine compartment and another 100 throughout the car, so it wasn't a huge deal. Okay. Alrighty, now we're ready to put that back in. And we'll fire it up before we put the cover back on, just to be sure that everything's good. It's not unusual to get a little puff of smoke if any oil has leaked down into the engine compartment. And this one, we had one cylinder that did do that, so you will see a little puff, but it shouldn't be a misfire or anything like that. If you got a misfire, then something went wrong. Occasionally you do get a dud spark plug, although it gets rarer as we move further into the future, thankfully. A lot of times I'll use a 1/4-inch impact for this, but I don't know. I got plenty of time this morning, which is a rarity. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and start it. Make sure you don't have anything laying here. If you do, or if you're just not sure, you can always just lay that back on like so. Perfect. No misfire, no issues, no nothing. All right, because mine was leaking here, I'm going to go ahead and replace this gasket. I'll take that and lay it off. I do have a replacement. And hopefully that'll stop further issues from coming forward. We'll take this back up a little bit. Throw that out. Slide this back into place. And that's all she wrote. When I worked at the dealership, we replaced those oil cap gaskets with every oil change. But at independent shops, you're lucky if they get a drain plug gasket replaced. Usually they don't. Okay, I'm gonna leave those two bolts off because I am gonna be doing some more work on this car in another video. And so the last things to do with this are to move our turbo hose here back into place. and tighten those both down. Boom, that's it. We're done. Okay. Well, that's it. On a turbocharged model like this, you're looking at 1.2 hours of labor plus the cost of the plugs at dealer costs. So $120 an hour, so we'll call it $150 in labor and probably $150 in parts. So you're looking at $300 to do this job. Now, I use genuine Volvo parts on this car. Volvo spark plugs, they cost me $55 with free shipping online. You save a few dollars, but only 2 or 3 if you were to go with a Denso Iridium plugs. And so you're looking at $60 versus $300, and you get to keep the rest. And it didn't take long. As you can see, it was less than a half hour, even with filming and having to fix those little wires there. These jobs are super simple. They're jobs you should be doing. If you buy a Volvo, you don't know when the spark plugs are done, do them. Please do them, because if you ignore that, you end up having to eat coils. A single coil, you know, depending on where you get it from, if you get a quality one, that's going to be $75 to $150, and you're still going to have to go in there and replace the plugs at that point. So save yourself the trouble, save yourself the misfire, which could damage your catalytic converter, and go ahead and take care of that while you can. That'll do it for today, my friends. Take care.